Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, good day, wherever you are in the world today. My name is Herb and I am an alcoholic. Welcome to our Big Book 12-Step Workshop. Please join me in prayer. God, please set aside everything that I think I know about myself, my unmanageability, the 12 steps, and you, for an open mind and a new experience with myself, my unmanageability, the 12 steps, and especially you. Please join me in the serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things that cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. So we're looking specifically at step 9, made direct amends. That's how the step reads. I'm reading it from page 59. Made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them, the person on your list, or others that may be implicated in this particular situation. We wrapped up last week by talking about infidelity and the Big Book's approach to that. And I mentioned that at least my interpretation and my experience with the Big Book's suggestion puts it into like 3 categories. If they don't know, do we tell them? My interpretation, no. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not in a sex addiction or relationship addiction program. So I'm not knowledgeable or experienced in those dimensions. I'm coming from my own experience and my own limited knowledge of this issue. I don't want to be controversial, but I'm attempting to share with you my understanding of the Big Book, as well as how I applied it to my personal life and what the outcomes were. If she knows in a general way, the Big Book suggests that you admit it. Yep. In a general way, but no details. And then on page 82, if they know all of the details, it basically says, try to avoid a discussion about the whole situation and the issue, and try to get a situation where you're both willing to release it, to let it go, and to begin fresh, either by separating or by some form of healing and reconciliation. The Big Book is very clear that this is a difficult situation. Perhaps there are some cases, page 82, where the utmost frankness is demanded. No outsider can appraise such an intimate situation. It may be that both will decide that the way of good sense and loving kindness is here the attitudes and here the principles, common sense, good sense, and loving kindness. Really difficult to attempt to have those two attitudes where there's been such a serious betrayal and such a serious harm and hurt, maybe over a long period of time, actually. Each might pray about it. You know, Bill brings that in inevitably almost in every step, because underneath each step is the assumption that we're powerless to do it. I've indicated to you that the human structure, I was thinking about this over the weekend. You know, biology is destiny. Our genetics has determined an awful lot of the way our life is going to turn out. And the two things that make us human from a structural standpoint, from a physiological standpoint, from a biological standpoint, the two things that make us human is our third brain. It has two functions, two primary functions: to know in a reflective way, and to make decisions in a completely voluntary, free way, to take actions. To know is a function. To decide is a function. And that makes us particularly human. No other sentient reality or animal or being that we know of has those two functions. It's the two things that make us human. And Bill says in both of those areas, addicts, alcoholics have a deficiency, are ineffective. We don't know that we don't know. We're subject to delusion. And we can't decide consistently to do the right thing. We do what we don't want to do, and we don't do what we want to do. Powerless to do that. And in every step and in each component in each step, Bill suggests prayer. Oh, there's lots of thinking, there's lots of writing, there's lots of talking and discussing, but underneath every step and every recommendation, he says, in the final analysis, you can't do anything really about it radically, existentially. He doesn't use those words, but I want to get to that core. On our own power, he says on page 62, we can't even reduce it much by wishing or trying on our own power. That's his words. Unmanageability, that spiritual malady. So he suggests prayer. And each of you has been introduced to steps 2 and 3. That's your decision. Step 2, your understanding in your mind and decision in your will. Step 3, your understanding in your mind. What does it mean to turn? And your decision to take actions to turn. Under each of those is prayer. The impossibility of having any real, tangible understanding of infinite. Not possible. Being able to actually turn and be in alignment with reality on a consistent basis. Well, each of us has found that impossible. I'll use the term impossible. If we have no such complications, there is plenty we should do at home. So he's really focusing on the family, the domestic situation, whatever that means to each one of us. Page 82. Sometimes we hear an alcoholic, I'll say addict, say that the only thing he needs to do is be sober, keep sober, or abstinent, to use our terminology. Certainly, we must keep sober or abstinent, for there will be no home, no relationships, no family. I'm broadening it. If we don't. But I'm a long way from making good to the partner or the parents or the siblings or the children or the boss or the colleagues or the subordinates or the church or the community or the neighborhood. For years, we've treated them shockingly bad, unhealthy. Passing all understanding is the patients, mothers and wives and people of any have had with alcoholics, addicts. Had this not been so, many of us would have no homes today, would perhaps be dead. The alcoholic, the addict, is like a tornado roaring his way through the lives of others. Hearts are broken. Sweet relationships are dead. Affections have been uprooted. Selfish and inconsiderate habits have kept the home, the relationships, the family in turmoil. When we look back over our history, it's like looking at the devastation when we see the impact of a hurricane or tornado. We feel a person is unthinking when that person says that sobriety or abstinence is enough. And then he gives this image, which is clearly connected to an era long gone by for most of us. He is like the farmer who came up out of his cyclone cellar to find his home ruined. To his wife, he remarked, "Don't see anything the matter here, Ma. Ain't it grand the wind stopped blowing?" A completely unrealistic evaluation, naive, and I'll be kind and leave it at that. Page 83. Yes, there is a long period of reconstruction. Please embrace that as your mantra if you're new. And by new, I define that the first 5 years. The first 5 years in a 12-step program, not the first 5 years of recovery or sobriety or abstinence. They may be correlated. But many people come into a 12-step way of life and they have difficulty getting some traction. 5 years, for me, people are newcomers. And I'm probably projecting because I was. I didn't think I was, but I didn't have my first journey through the steps literally precisely as a textbook, the way I'm hopefully leading you through it, until I was going into my 5th year of sobriety, and then everything changed. Because my mind was awakened. That's the promise. And my will was given power. My mind knew what to do, and my will was able to do it. Accountability and prayer. That's the 1-2 punch, step 11 and step 12. That's the 1-2, absolute formula. We must take the lead. A remorseful mumbling that we are sorry won't fill the bill at all. Again, please highlight that if you haven't. Sorry doesn't cut it. A remorseful mumbling, even though you're remorseful and you're just, telling. I don't use the word I'm sorry. I didn't in the amends process. I tried to avoid it. I regret. I use that a lot. And that's the word I recommend people, at least as a primer, as a springboard. I regret. We ought to sit down with the family and frankly analyze the past as we now see it. But that's, of course, after you've done your 4th and 5th step where you understand it and you're sitting down after direction from a experienced sponsor or step guide. And most of the time I recommend it be individually and not as a group. Like you don't sit down with your parents together. There are exceptions. I've seen places where it has been more important than not for them to sit down, or with the children, maybe 2 or 3 at a time. I don't recommend it, but there are certain circumstances where it's very recommended. So there are no rules here, like every place else. Experience and common sense. But experience dominates. Not knowledge, but experience of actual specific experience with each of the specific amends. And today, there's a plethora of people who have had experiences with the 9th step. So you can go to a variety of people for a variety of counsel in a variety of situations. Being very careful not to criticize them. Their contribution to our misery is not to be discussed. Even if it's 80% worse than mine, which was 20%, thinking in terms of ratios. And it's very clear in the work that we've already covered. Their behavior is none of our business in this conversation. We don't bring it up. And quite frankly, if they bring it up, I really ask people to suggest in prayer that they try to avoid it. They try not to allow the other person to make amends at the same time, because people get into, they get in the mood, they get in the rhythm of it. Again, no rules here, but it's much better to say, you know, I'd really like to focus on why I'm here, and I really appreciate and respect your wish to participate in terms of discussing perhaps the wrongs that you've done. Maybe we could set another time for that. And then if in fact it seems real appropriate or really timely, of course, go with it. That's where experience comes in and prayer comes in also. Their defects may be glaring, but the chances are that our own actions are partly responsible. In the suggestions with regard to the sex inventory, Bill said, you know, we really make our partners crazy with our behavior and with our lying and with our betrayals and with the new word. It's not a new word, but it's certainly been in the conversations, the social and cultural conversation, gaslighting. When I was doing this work back in 1980, I never heard the term. I heard it since then, of course. So we clean house with the family. And now here's a suggestion in terms of the preparation for step 9, of course, but it also tags wonderfully into step 11. Asking each morning in meditation that our Creator show us the way of patience, tolerance, kindliness, and love. Those of you who have followed my suggestions, which is in step 11, to review and highlight the material in the Big Book, pages 85 to 88, and then reread it and outline it, and then take a look at my outline in the Way of Life document, we'll see that I've incorporated these very words, this almost verbatim suggestion in the morning practice as part of the script as to how to begin a practice of prayer and meditation. The spiritual life is not a theory. Then in italics, we have to live it. That's why recently, actually, it's only been the last couple, 3 years, I've really been emphasizing, look at your feet. We have to live it. Well, we don't have to, of course, but it's not a theory, this spiritual life. One of my good friends, one of the wisdom people back in the day when I was originally getting sober, I would go to meetings that I knew that this person was at because he was particularly articulate and a little bit crazy, which always made it interesting. And he said, there are 2 sides to Alcoholics Anonymous, the spiritual side and the outside. I hope you're hearing it. You see, it's all spiritual. There's no spiritual side to a 12-step program. There's no spiritual side to a 12-step program. Well, listen to the 12th step. Having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps. It's all spiritual because it's all about cracking the acorn to become an oak tree. It's all about finding a connection to the spirit so that we can wake up. And that's why when I earlier was talking about under every step is powerlessness and a prayer to be connected to power. Unless one family expresses a desire to live upon spiritual principles, we think we ought not to urge them. Yeah, Evangelization doesn't really work in this context. Let our behavior, as somebody once said, become the big book, probably modeled after what Gandhi said. Be the change that you want to effect. Be the change that you want to effect. Or as Augustine, I think, is reported to have said, he's a 4th century bishop, wherever you are, preach the good news. If you have to, use words. Man, I love that. Your very dignity and self-respect and behavior, that's what comes, is like a beacon, like a lantern. Not at first, because people don't trust it, but with consistent behavior. I've mentioned that before. Trust is earned, it's never given, and it's earned with consistent behavior. And after 5 years, my wife said, I trust you now. 5 years. Yeah. Well, I'd hurt her very deeply. We should not talk incessantly to them about spiritual matters, of course, unless they want to. My wife was in the program, therefore we had a wonderful spiritual connection and became companions on this path. She's not as, analytical as I am, but we kept it very experiential. She was able to share with me and model for me the human part, the embodiment part, the emotional part. Our behavior will convince them more than our words. Well, you've never heard that before. Yeah, exactly. We must remember that 10 or 20 years of addiction would make a skeptic out of anyone. There may be some wrongs we can never fully right. We can't change our behavior, we can't change the impact of our behavior on people. We can change our behavior, of course, but that doesn't change our history. We don't worry about them if we can honestly say to ourselves that we would right them if we could. You see, that willingness and that intention, that's the key here. Some people cannot be seen. We send them an honest letter. I consider that a direct amend. It could be an indirect amend. It doesn't make any difference. Direct can be a face-to-face. It can be a Zoom call. Of course, these days, it could be a telephone call. A letter probably is a little bit indirect, but it's still fairly direct. As I mentioned, make sure if you're a sponsor that you have them read to you or you read it before it's ever sent. And if you're a sponsee doing it, that you have somebody objective, take a look at it, or at least hear you read it to them. When you read it out loud, it really can make a difference for you as the person who's the writer. And there may be valid reasons for postponement in some cases, but we don't delay if it can be avoided. We should be sensible. Here are some of the recommended attitudes now. Tactful, considerate, and humble, without being servile or scraping. As God's people, we stand on our feet. We don't crawl before anyone. That's a statement of humility. We're not hanging down. We're stand erect and with a dignity and self-respect. Recognizing a perspective. Yes, we have created havoc, but now we're here and we've made a decision and are completely committed to changing our behavior, and we're going to repair it to the best of our ability. If we are painstaking about this phase, I hope you've looked that word up. If you haven't, please do. It has nothing to do with pain. It just means careful with detail. That's all. Cross the T's and dots the I's, but you perfectionists, be careful here. This isn't an invitation to being perfect. It's an invitation to being complete. We will be amazed before we are halfway through. Well, that's an interesting comment. We'll pick it up next week on that. It wasn't my experience that I was aware of the promises halfway through. I may have been experiencing them, but I was not aware of them until I was fully through and doing kind of an inventory on whether I had completed all my amends in preparation for a conversation with my step guide. And so I realized, oh my God, I've really changed. And of course, I was getting feedback, very positive feedback at work and at home. The attitude's a helpful and forgiving spirit. The intention to accept responsibility for the impact of our behavior. But as I've said in commenting concerning guilt and shame, I'm not responsible for other people's reactions, their feelings. All right. I don't hurt people's feelings. Their reactions of hurt are their responsibility, not mine. Now I have to look at the circumstances that created their reaction, of course. But their reactions, their responsibility. Don't make their problems your problems. In the same way, I don't make my problems their problems. We're cleaning up our side. They're responsible to take full 100% responsibility for their side. Now, you don't have to educate them in that regard. It may be appropriate to make a comment, and it may not be. That's where some preparation, what is the right word I'm looking for? Rehearsal. Some rehearsal of the dialogue beforehand with a trusted person, probably your sponsor or step guide, but it could be with somebody else, where the other person takes the role and you rehearse the words so that you can get the feelings and the actions and the vocabulary and a sense of perhaps the right way that you want to, a healthy way that you want to express yourself. I've mentioned some things. I'll come back to that here in a minute. I did look at the suggestions, thank you very much, of some of the Al-Anons in the group to take a look at the 12 and 12 in Al-Anon, step 8 and 9. I didn't read the other parts, but 8 and 9. And it was interesting. It is actually quite a different tone, quite a different perspective. And I'm not talking about subtle. I mean, it's majorly different. The 8th step in the 12 and 12 of Al-Anon is mostly about the Al-Anon person, that trying to relieve that person of over sense of responsibility, try to relieve that person of a sense of guilt and shame in terms of the way they've led their life. And I understand it, but the perspective is quite different. It says, beyond step 8 on my summary, be honest with yourself, your hidden motives, your subconscious. What causes you pain? Well, I mean, that couldn't be any different. That's 180 degree different than the AA recommendation, which is, in fact, it's not about you at all. Your pain is irrelevant. It's how did you impact them? I mean, I like the balance, but it was startlingly different. It says the purpose. I'm going to make a list here. The purpose is to clear your conscience. The purpose is to have self-understanding, to get rid of your guilt, to feel more comfortable with yourself, to free yourself from pain that we've inflicted on ourselves, from painful memories generated by guilt. I understand it. I'm just pointing it out. It's just very, very different. And in fact, when you do it either way, I'm confident that there's going to be this holistic healing from my own experience in terms of doing from the perspective of AA, the purpose is not about me, the purpose is about them, although I am trying to put my life in order, read page 77, that in fact, all of those purposes were accomplished as secondary byproducts of doing this work. It's just an emphasis. We cannot take refuge in our excuses. We have some of the harm was nicely put, a wonderful phrasing with regard to family. We have undermined children's security. They worded the harm done. Great, clear phrase. Undermined children's security. That was the harm. We generated hatred in them for one or the other parents. And we were a poor model. We didn't give them the advantage. We harmed them. They didn't know how to be a man. They didn't know how to be a woman. They didn't know how to be a father. They didn't know how to be a mother in the healthy sense, because we did not model that. In the step 9 chapter, it says honesty and good judgment. Again, very, very echo of what the big book and the 12 and 12 suggest as an attitude. Honesty and good judgment. The purpose, though, of step 9, it says, is to gain peace of mind ourselves by erasing feelings of guilt, to get release of my uneasiness. In fact, it said something, this may be a paraphrase, of healing myself. Once again, I see this in my experience as the byproduct of doing the work of repairing the damage and changing myself, being changed by the steps 6 and 7 in prayer and accountability, that as I bring healing to them, I am healed. And so the outcome is the same. The emphasis is different. A personal change where we express regret. So the Al-Anon literature talked about the same term that I used in my commentary earlier. They had a great phrase, maintain a sense of humor. I love that. It's not in the big book, but I love that. It's a great recommendation to maintain. I don't mean, to have a good time, but I do mean maintain a sense of humor, which is that humility, that lack of being defended or defensiveness. And tactful, of course. Another wonderful observation was to show interest in them as part of the repair damage, to show real interest in them. Well phrased, I thought. Tolerance, acceptance, gentleness, be thoughtful and generous. You've heard me talk about the approach to the operating in principle. Always take the high road and be generous. It's right there in the Al-Anon literature. Be generous. Consider their well-being and their feelings, which appealed to me because that's not my default position, to consider your feelings and your well-being. It's here because of the training I received in the steps process and with the step guide, but it's not my default position as a whoever I am. So I had an example of some amends that I did that I wanted to share with you. Because it might be relevant to the people who have been in business with expense accounts. I never met an expense account that I didn't manipulate. And yeah, I mean, I'm not proud of that, but I'm keeping a sense of humor. And so it became very clear to me, I was a thief. And when I resigned from that job ahead of the posse, after 20 years, I went to the highest level person I could. And we were sitting and talking about my termination as well as, and I said, for the 20 years I've worked here, I've cheated on my expense account. Well, he was kind of like, whoa. And I gave him a number that I had estimated over the 20 years, which was a 6-figure number. And he said, wow. And I said, I'm willing to pay overtime, but I don't have the money to write you a check right now. And he said, Herb, he said, this was a long conversation about a lot of things. He said, you've been a real major leadership contributor in our firm. And there were years that we probably didn't treat you as well as we could have. And there are years that we didn't pay you as much as it was warranted by your performance and your contribution. He said, didn't you get a company car about 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, 4 months ago, whatever it was? And I said, yeah, it is a full pay for a company car. And he said, why don't you, when you leave, you're not going to have a car. Why don't you take the car and write me a check for $1 and we'll call it even. Yeah. I mean, I was stunned. I said, thank you. I mean, I didn't say, no, I can't do that. I've got to owe it to the universe. I didn't do that, crystal magic. I said, well, thank you. Well, here I am making amends for years of thievery, and he gives me a 5-figure car for $1. That was back in 1988, 89. These are the kinds of things that happen. I'm not bragging about it, but I'm saying I'm setting the experience of magic on one hand and miracle on the other hand. I've talked to you about the rehabilitation of my wife and I. I've talked about you making amends to my dead father. I've talked to you about finding and making amends to my mother. You can't get here from there. And yet, these are life experiences. I was on a retreat as part of this process of making amends. I was at actually Richard Rohr's retreat center in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And those of you who are familiar with it, it's a desert, but there's these very large, they call them buttes, B-U-T-T-E, which are very large geological sort of mountains that have been cut off at the top somehow by nature. And you can navigate your way up to the top, which is what I like to do. And I sat up there all day, writing out some amends and doing my planning and meditating and having just a wonderful hermit time. And I decided that there were 3 amends that I need to make to dead people. And so when I got home, I'm in Albuquerque. When I get home the next week, I'm going to go to a cemetery like I did with my father, and I'm going to make those amends. Well, on my way down, I got to the bottom and I took a trail back to the camp that I was staying at. And I noticed off of the trail about 20 yards, a glint of light. It kept flashing. I didn't know what it was, but it got my attention. I thought, well, that's interesting. And I went over there and there were 3 graves there. Yeah, 3 graves, 3 gravestones. I was able to sit there and make my amends, write out my letters, and leave them buried with each one of those 3 gravestones. I mean, pretty dramatic. Even reminding myself of it 30 years later brings really just tears to my eyes. I made amends to my friend. I had borrowed his motorcycle and I had abused it and run it through some sand, and I brought it home and I parked it in his garage, and I didn't know literally that I was abusing it. I was just out having fun. And good friend I am. And he called me the next day. He said, Herb, the spokes and all the stuff in the mechanical stuff is all filled with sand. I said, wow, I don't know how that must have happened. Wow, that's a real accident. I hope you don't have any trouble fixing it. But one of my best friends. So he's 30 years later, I'm making amends to him, and we're sitting across having dinner. He's been out of town, out of the country for a long time, and he's going back the next day. And I make the amends to him about that. I'm willing to write a check for what they remembered. And he says, you know what? He says, wow, we're really good friends. Thanks for the offer. But you know what you can really do for me is I've got a motorcycle in my garage, and I'm leaving town tomorrow to be out of country for 10 years. I want you to have it. How does that work? Well, I mean, in this case, I didn't say thank you. Yes, I'll take it for free. I said, yes, I'll take it. I'll research the retail value of it and I will send you a check for it. And he said, oh, that'll be fine. So again, common sense in different situations. You know what I mean? I didn't discuss any of that with my sponsor or step guide. These were just things that had happened to me and were spontaneous things. Sometimes I would have to pause, like with my amends to my father, with amends to my wife, with my amends to my mother, with my amends to the woman that I hadn't seen in 25 years. I've mentioned all of those. I had to get very clear and specific directions about people that you can't find or shouldn't find. I've mentioned it before, but it's such an important aspect. I'm going to mention it again. People that you can't find or you shouldn't find. Shouldn't find, meaning that it's not appropriate to resurrect that kind of hurt again. There's not going to be a proportionate benefit to that person, not about you, but to that person. How do you finish making amends then? I want to be clear. I probably said it before, but it's such an important part. You can finish your amends. You may need to be creative. You may need to be spiritual in the sense of your approach to it. But it's about finishing your amends. Every situation where I felt I had harmed somebody, but I either couldn't find them or I shouldn't find them, I created a prayer practice. So that if it was a kind of a light touch thing, but I was going to make an amend if I had had the opportunity, then maybe I'd pray for 3 days, a prayer for their healing. If it was something a little more substantial, like on a scale of 1 to 3, maybe a 2, I would spend maybe a couple weeks each day in prayer for that specific person for their healing. If it was a more substantial thing, I had, I think, 2 or 3 that were a very substantial, but I either couldn't find them or I shouldn't find them. Then it was like 3 or 4 months that I each day, like with the prayer for the removal of deep resentment, I had the list. I had a specific amend time frame. I honored that, and when the time frame was done, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 3 months, whatever it was, then I was done with the amend, fully prepared to make an amend if they ever surfaced in my life, and it was appropriate to make the amend. Those 2 concepts, if they surface in my life, and it's appropriate that I make the amend, because it might be that somebody, it's not my experience, but somebody I might meet at the grocery store, or I might meet at a funeral or a wedding, and it's not the time then to make the amend, unless it is. Again, no rules, but common sense prevails here, where there's because this is such an intimate and sacred process. I guess the final thoughts I'd leave you with are the 3 questions that have come to me just as I've been thinking about this final work on the 9th step, at least from my presentation standpoint. How free do you want to be? You've heard that from me before. How healthy do you want to be? I don't think I've said that before. It came to me over the weekend. How healthy do you want to be? How happy do you want to be? Of course, we've heard that before. And this came to me over the weekend also. How helpful do you want to be? These are not, there's no cut and dry answer. There's no formula here, but there are challenges, especially how free do you want to be? The assignment will be to take a look at the Way of Life document. Yes, you've been looking at it probably. I don't know whether I've made it as clear as I'm about to concerning the forgiveness process. There's a meditation in there that I wrote after I finished my 9th step on forgiveness. I was asked to do a panel with Dr. Luskin back 30 years ago, and he had just published his book and finished his doctoral thesis. And I wrote out this meditation then. And then after I did some work with Dr. Luskin, and I modified it to reflect his 6-step process in the forgiveness to match our 12-step process. It's really my experiences are steps 4 through 9 are the equivalent to the processes that he describes from a psychological standpoint. So I would really recommend, if you haven't, or even if you have, to read and or reread that material more like a meditation than as a presentation. It's very dense. Lots of the lines will capture lots of knowledge and experience. So just be patient with it, but it bears reading more than once. If in fact you're interested in the process of forgiveness, it's a process that you are going to experience or have already experienced, certainly in this workshop. If you're doing your steps 4 through 5, you are beginning to experience the release, especially that prayer for the removal of deep resentment, the prayer for the removal of fear, the prayer for the removal of your dishonesty, the prayer for guidance with regard to principles, with regard to your sexual behavior. I mean, it's not possible for you to do this work without beginning to experience some release, because your consciousness improves, and organically you will release and be released from some of these bedevilments that torture us on a regular daily basis. I mean, that's unmanageability. We looked at that in step 1, the second half of step 1. At the same time, speaking of the bedevilments, you might want to just take a look at, I'm not saying memorize or anything, but on page 41, there's a comparison that was done by a friend of mine, Dan Sherman, in the preparation of his book, his guidelines to working the steps out of the big book. It's called Big Book Awakening. He was taken through the steps by the same man who took me through the steps the 3rd time. And it was those instructions from that man, along with the instructions that I had received earlier, that allowed me to prepare my book on it, which is very different than Dan's. His book is a more deliberate looking at each line of the big book. Mine is more a instruction process as to how to sort of think about and write about your own experience with the steps. But the point is that he wrote this comparison between the bedevilments and the promises. And I don't know whether Bill had that kind of consciousness, but it was a fabulous insight on Dan's part that he was able to line it up. It just lines up so wonderfully. And I will look at that and read that next week so that you'll have an experience with it. It might be a benefit for you to have at least scanned it between now and then. Also, we'll be beginning to take a look at step 10. Again, we looked at step 10, I guess I would say, kind of superficially in the beginning in January when we started this workshop. We'll see when I share with you my knowledge and my experience of step 10 over the next couple weeks, pages 84 and 85. It's assignment number 23. I'm going to go very slow and unpack certainly the heart of the matter with regard to step 10, which will be certainly all of page 84 and the first half of 85. And then I'll probably talk about emotional sobriety, because step 10, I've equated step 10 as the tool for emotional sobriety. And that might spill over to the following week. So it would probably behoove you to read 84 and 85 down through page 85 to the words step 11. And we'll, over the next couple of weeks, be covering step 10, as well as forgiveness, as well as emotional sobriety. So it's a deep dive into the implications of this now entering into the world of the Spirit, as Bill calls it. We enter into the world of the Spirit. Thanks for giving me time to think about that. All right, so we have a couple hands raised here.
The eighth and ninth step I'd like to talk about was a mother-in-law, ex-mother-in-law that I had, my first mother-in-law. And I got very close while I was married to her son. And yet while I was married to her son, I lied to her quite a bit. There were a lot of things that happened in that divorce that were not pretty.
Sure.
And hurt my feelings really badly. And I'm sure that I, hurt her quite a bit myself. And so when I got into the program, it was many years later. It was, I want to say 8 years, at least 8 years later. She had passed from cancer.
Mm.
And unfortunately, we hadn't ever been able to reconcile. And so I did go to her graveside, and I had written her a letter with my sponsor and read it to my sponsor, and took that to her graveside and read it and burned it, and left the ashes there.
Mm-hmm.
And got a lot of freedom from that, and really felt released and forgave her and felt forgiven. More importantly, I felt so much release from that one amends. And it was really a beautiful process.
Yeah. It's pretty remarkable, and you and I can talk about it this way, and we can actually get quite emotional about it and express our feelings and maybe even cry a little bit, and people will witness that. But they can't experience that level of freedom that we experience when we actually experience the event itself, until they have their own experience with it. I just wanted to heighten the expectation and the hope that's it's so available to us.
I had so much guilt and so much remorse,
Yeah.
and everything, especially with us not being able to even talk to each other before she passed. And
Right.
she was very she was old school and didn't really believe in people coming to see her when she got cancer. She didn't want visitors. She didn't want to be seen that way.
Sure.
And all of that. And so there was no way to really do that any other way. And so I really wasn't expecting the amount of freedom I got from it.
Exactly. No,
I really wasn't. I just thought, well, okay, I'll do this because this is what they say I'm supposed to do.
exactly.
And I was really young in the program.
Yeah.
I only had probably a year.
Yeah.
And just the release, and even just now talking about it,
Yeah.
the love that I still have in my heart for her,
Yeah.
and the lack of bitterness there is
There you
just
go.
amazing.
It is. Yeah. Well, and that's freedom, as you're describing it. That is the freedom that is promised us. So thank you so much for that.
I've had experience with making an amends to someone who passed, and I think I have another one to someone else who's passed. I went to my grandmother's gravesite, and part of what happened for me is all these memories came flooding back, where I'd sort of felt like, as a result of my disease, I'd been aloof to her. And then what came to me is that we, in spite of my illness, we had a close, warm relationship. That was a thing that happened standing, which was amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. And then I had a wonderful experience with my in-laws that was a powerful one, because my father-in-law died about 7 years ago. And we remained friends for the remainder of his life. And I think that was as a result of me cleaning that mess up. And then the first big group of amends that I did, which was quite a while ago, I got reunited with friends who I am now still friends with after all this time. 3 women that I grew up with.
Yeah.
So the only one that went wrong was the one that I didn't check in with my sponsor. And I went in there with an agenda like, I'm going to heal this by God,
Yeah.
you know, and it was terrible. It was really terrible.
Yeah. Were you ever able to clean it up?
I've tried.
All
I've
right.
tried.
Mhm.
It's my sister-in-law.
All right.
I've tried, and we're fine. But I didn't know till looking back that it was as a result of me not checking in with anybody.
Yeah.
And it was because I had a plan. Like I said, I had an agenda.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to make this better.
Exactly.
Yeah. So.
No, I think it's wonderful, the balance and the witness that, you know, we can make a mistake here. And
Yeah.
the one thing I want to caution people is that reconciliation is really wonderful, especially if you want it, but it's not necessary. Bob and I, all right, we never reconciled in the sense that we were friends. He still hated me and I avoided him. But here's the freedom. Whenever I walked into I left and went to a competitor, a professional event where you have a conference or something, and he would walk in the room, I would be quite comfortable and I would walk over and I would greet him quite comfortably and sincerely. He was very uncomfortable with it, but I was really comfortable. So that's the freedom that we're talking about, not necessarily the reconciliation. You may not want to reconcile with a mother or a father. You may not want to reconcile with an ex. You may not want to reconcile with a brother or a sister. It's okay. It's your decision.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I realized that I don't want to reconcile with that person because the relationship will just continue being a sick relationship.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And there's nothing to reconcile, but just like you said, I became more, really what I became was more aware of what got me into the mess. So I'm also in a program called ACA.
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone's familiar with it, but if you're not, they work through
most everybody is. Most
Oh,
everybody.
yes. So,
Yeah.
so that laundry list for anyone who lives
Yeah.
in the victim shame, this is really the root of my problem.
And when she's talking about, you might want to describe it a little bit, because there may be people that don't know exactly what the implication is of that. That's a formal list that's a pretty wonderful tool. Go ahead.
So when I joined ACA, it was like, oh yeah, that's me. That's how I knew that I belonged. But in that relationship, what was there was one of their things is we confuse love and pity, and tend to love people we can pity and rescue. So I'm the rescuer. I'm going to save everybody. I'm going to save everybody from feeling pain and getting entangled in messes, but I get entangled in their mess. So I made I spoke to my sponsor. I made this amends, and then I asked her what would she need to do? What would she want me? How could I help her? And she said, and she just gave conditions, and basically the conditions were that anytime she would call, whenever she would call, I would always answer her call. And that's when I realized that I didn't want that. That's where we got stuck. And I just wrote in a very nice way that I said to her I would think about it. I answered her back and I wrote her that wouldn't be healthy for me.
Yeah.
I was just open like that. It wouldn't be healthy for me.
Right.
And then she stopped writing me.
Yeah.
It was a long time ago. She stopped writing. She stopped calling. And just like a few weeks ago, suddenly I get an email from her and she's writing me something from Al-Anon. And I get another email from a different 12-step program. And all I do each time was I just write back, thank you so much for sharing that with me. It was so meaningful.
Yeah.
But I know it's not going to be something that a relationship that will ever really be a healthy relationship from my part or from her part.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
it's
You
like
you
what
don't
you
have
said.
to do, and I've made the point before with the example I gave, but you don't have to do what they ask you to do because there are people who are not emotionally balanced. Exactly.
Right. And that's what I realized. Here is someone, and it's me that is always trying to save these unemotionally balanced people. But that doesn't allow me, that it only came from my own low self-esteem.
Correct.
And when I did more work, in the 12 steps,
Wonderful.
I began to notice that. And as I released them, I became much, I had more energy left to manifest myself in a much healthier relationship. So it's very freeing. That's what it
Yes.
is. The
Yes.
feeling of it.
Amen.
You know,
Amen.
feeling.
Amen. I agree 100%. Wonderful. Thanks, Maria.
Okay, so I want to talk about the forgiveness thing too. And you know, I did read Fred Luskin's book last year, and I wasn't able to make the seminar a few weeks ago, and I'm going to listen to it if I can get a copy. But you know, I've been, you know, when I listen and I read, and it all makes sense, but I just have to walk through a couple of things, what it means to forgive. I mean, I have forgiven both my parents many years ago. I am able to do the forgiveness stuff, but the one I'm having the really hard time with, as you can all imagine.
Oh, let me guess.
I'm taking that to my grave. God damn it. No,
Oh,
I really
you're welcome to. I mean,
No,
you know, drink poison, hope they die.
Yeah, no, I really do. Like I said last night, I mean, I just so want to be free of this.
Yes, you do.
But so the part I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around is, what does it look like? So I can forgive him and not reconcile with him.
Mhm.
You know, of course, that's different because that's always been, you know, that's the patterns that I learned growing up. You know, you forgive and you just keep getting dumped on. So no more of that. But does that mean, like, can I be angry at him? I mean, or
Well, wait. What is this a trick question?
no, I mean, I'm telling you.
Wait. Let's go back to the in between column 3 and column 4. Is there a prayer there? What's the purpose of that prayer? In between column 3 and column 4, the resentment inventory. What's the purpose of that prayer?
So, okay, so is that the prayer where we say they're a sick person and,
Yes,
you know, love to, yeah,
those
okay.
are the words. What's the purpose?
To help us have empathy for them.
No.
To help us release them.
Yes, but what does that mean?
That's yeah, I know, I get it, and then I lose it. So that's why I want to have this.
All right, it's really I've even named the prayer in the Way of Life document, prayer for the removal of deep resentment.
Okay.
So this is soul surgery. The cancer's there, resentment, and the divine healer, the divine surgeon, comes in with the scalpel and removes your anger. Why is that important?
Well, otherwise you can't release that. You know, you can't release the anger, and you
But
can't.
why is it important to not have anger?
Well, because, well, you know, I won't stay sober. I can't handle.
No. You're mouthing some words now. Yeah. I want you to pause and think about what you're saying. You don't want to have anger, not just feel it. You don't want to have anger because fill in the blank.
Well, it takes up way too much. It makes, I don't like how it makes me feel. I don't like how it.
Not about how you feel.
You know, it's, how does I, what, you know, it's, when you ask me, how does it make me feel? Is that what you're asking?
I'm not asking you that.
No.
I'm asking you what's the purpose of eliminating anger from our repertoire of responses.
So we can focus on, being lanterns, right?
Okay, yes, that's a
Yeah.
really good image. I'm going to read from page 71. We
Okay.
hope that you are convinced now that God can remove whatever self-will has blocked us off from God. I'm going to change it. We hope you are convinced that whatever this power is can remove whatever self-will has blocked you off from power. Your anger is the cloud that blocks you from the sunlight.
Yes.
To the extent that you have the anger, the bigger the block, the more darkness there is. So yes, we remove anger because we don't want to drink again. Really great answer, very accurate, but way on the surface, because you didn't actually hear what you were saying. The very fact that you're asking the question tells me that you're of a mindset you can tolerate this rage and anger toward this man who is a sick man who hurt you and all the rest of it. No, not even a grain of sand.
No, I can't.
Yeah.
I can't take it at all. And I know that part of it. And I was trying to say that I can't even be articulate sometimes about this, about it blocking from the sunlight of the spirit. So what does it look? So if you release somebody, you just like, okay, it's enough.
Well, let me try something. Yeah. I mean, yes, until you have the experience, you can't actually describe the experience like we were talking about earlier. But let me just say, what's your relationship with alcohol? You're sober 25, 30 years, I think. Right?
0. That's my relationship with alcohol.
No, when you're at a dinner party, you may even be hosting it. Do you serve alcohol?
Oh yeah, no, I'm fine with everybody drinking.
You're in neutrality, right?
Neutrality, yeah.
You're in freedom.
Yeah.
That's what it is. The same neutrality you have around alcohol, you will have around your ex. Woo! That's pretty heavy duty.
Well, I actually, I thought I had it, but, and then I realized, no, I was still in this very much this, anyway.
Yeah, right.
So it's the different layers.
You're deeply hurt. Get it, 100%. What is forgiveness? It's the decision and submission to a process, including prayer, that releases you so that you're in a position of neutrality.
So then what it looks like, at least for right now, is it's my decision. And then when stuff comes up about it, again, it's a decision to not focus on that, to let that go.
I wouldn't agree with that. If stuff comes up, focus on it. How come it's coming up? You're not neutral. What is it in the third column that you believe that you can have this righteous reaction? What is it in the fourth column that gives you the motive, a corrupt one, to be vengeful or to be reaction in any negative way? See, the third and fourth column for me, those were the ingredients to forgiveness. My third column, I saw my delusional beliefs. And in the fourth column, I saw my corrupt motive. And between the two, it hammered me open. But I had to pray that prayer for the removal of deep resentment. And I had to finish the 8th and 9th step around the people that I had harmed, including Bob, the critter. Yeah. So you're in process. Yes, great questions. They're all the wonderful, healthy questions. Yes, you're in process. And what we're describing is the promise of an experience. But don't overlook this prayer for the removal of deep resentment. Have you finished your fourth step?
Yeah.
You did, well, no, did you do the fourth step this time?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
And
I
you
only
did your
had a
fifth
couple.
step?
I did. Well, yeah, I only had, my ex, and I did a
Okay.
couple of other, like,
Great.
it's mostly it's minor stuff at this point.
Yeah,
in
yeah,
my
yeah,
life.
of course.
So,
Yeah, good.
So
So you're actually in your eighth and ninth step around?
yeah, no, I'm right up where we are.
Wonderful,
Yeah.
wonderful.
I mean,
yeah.
I don't have an actual, I don't have an apology to make to my ex.
Well,
It's-
wait. Yeah, I understand. Okay, wait. Let me just examine something here.
Okay.
Is there any harm that you have created for him, any harm on him that hasn't been resolved by you?
No,
Okay.
no.
All right. Then you're clean. All right.
Yeah.
Then so what you're really dealing with then is this little hot coal in the center of your heart of hurt and whatever else is
Well,
going.
betrayal. Yeah.
Yeah,
You know
yeah,
what?
yeah, right. Yep.
And you know what? And I'm sure it's this, it's very ancient stuff. So, because it's clearly triggering an ancient.
Yeah.
And you know what? And I think probably a big part is I'm angry at myself because why am I always so gullible or naive? I don't know what, I mean, me, there's
Well, that's
no way.
another dimension of it then, that you have some resentment, anger toward yourself. And even at 25, 30 years of sobriety, I should be better than this. Some anger even about that, maybe. I don't know. I'm speculating. But
Well,
yeah, you're in
yeah,
play.
there's always that.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's that
you're
too.
in play. You're in play. The recording of the Luskin workshop is on YouTube.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you want to look at it, and the first part of it is me talking about the 9th step, you may or may not want to do that. You may want to just go right to the Luskin part because it brought tears to my eyes.
Yeah, no, I'm going to go to the next one.
Yeah.
I was in New York with my kids. So
Wonderful.
it was.
Yeah, of course. That's wonderful. That's why we record it. Exactly.
Okay. So I just need to keep doing that prayer and just leaning in and
Yes, and yet, if you have the substantial energy that I think you do have around it, you might want to revisit the column 3, column 4 to,
yeah.
I know, to kind of like get underneath it. So why do you have the button? I mean, that was a rhetorical question. You want to find out why this button is still there that can be pressed.
I actually know the answer. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, okay, good. Yep. That was, I hope, very helpful to you. It sounds, I mean, you sound so at peace right now, quite frankly. I mean, something just happened.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, but the discussion, I'm confident, was very valuable to everybody else because we unpacked, we got down into the bowels of it. Yeah. Experientially, not just theoretically. Herb talking. No, this was good. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
This is giving me a real remember when and a real experience of the process and the number of years it took me to get to a place to live in that neutrality with somebody. It's basically my brother who was my abuser for many, many years, but I could only blame. It took me years in the program to really, and to be able to, through some of the work with you and from Mel in Toronto, to be able to unpack that 4th column to understand that I had a part in it. And it's
a part in the, at least the
not the
feeling
abuse
that you have now, not the event, right?
No. And the abuse it wasn't me, but his anger and his anger at me for my controlling, to be honest,
Yeah. Okay.
right? And my judging him for
Yeah.
not taking care of our parents the way I thought he should,
Right.
and not doing things my way.
Really?
And he would, yeah, really. Could you imagine that?
Yeah, right. I'm trying to maintain that sense of humor. I'm not laughing at you, you know that, and you're handling it very nicely.
I'm laughing with you because
Yeah.
you know what? He told me for years I was judgmental.
Yeah.
I was judging him, and I could not hear it.
Right.
I could not hear it. He even sent me a birthday card that said something about here's to the queen who rules our family. And I didn't get the point, right?
Yeah.
But finally, I understood what selfish, self-centered self-will looked like.
Yes.
And I could finally see myself after doing enough
Yeah.
fourth step,
Yeah.
fourth column. And actually it was the 10th step.
All
If
right.
I could, I started it in the 10th step, and then I could apply it to that. And I could say, my God, look at that. And I was able to finally, and I prayed for him for years. I still pray for him every day,
Sure.
but I prayed for him for years. And he quit talking to me about 4 or 5 years before. It was very sad. He anyway, how he did it. But and so I could do nothing but write an amends letter to him
Yes.
and send it.
Yes.
And his daughter, it was the day before my mother died, and she was on one side of my mother and I was on the other. And she said to me, Auntie, he got the amends letter and I and my mother read it. And you know what? Get on with your life.
Wow, that's a gift.
That was a gift. That was a gift. She actually said my dad has the intelligence of a gnat. But anyway, that's beside the point.
Well, that was a gift too.
But it was a gift. And it was 2 years later, over his wife who was dying. He's never acknowledged the amends, but 2 years later, when his wife was dying and I was there at her bedside with him, he started to talk to me after 7 years of just being nothing.
Yeah.
And he acts as if there's nothing.
Yeah.
And I have totally forgiven him I went to ACA. I listened to the person who talked about that. I did all my work on my family of origin, including him in the years of abuse. And I can look at him now and feel nothing.
Yeah.
I feel nothing.
Yeah.
I can be kind to him. He just had knee surgery.
Yeah.
I was there every day for 5 weeks helping him do his exercises because that was a living amends.
There you go.
But I walked out the door and I knew if he said one miserable thing to me, I didn't have to stay. And he did not say one miserable thing. He was grateful. And today I can be in the same room with him. I was in the same room tonight with his granddaughter's birthday. But I could walk out and my head is held high and I feel nothing. And it's only because of the grace of this program and doing that work and being able to finally I was 28 years into the program before I understood what selfish, self-centered self-will. That column 4 and unpacking that has given me the greatest release in relationships. And making that amend and letting it go. I didn't need for him to instantaneously do anything.
Right.
But I had to learn that. So I'm listening to everybody and I'm really, and I have been over the weeks,
Right.
but I felt compelled to share because it is getting on my knees and praying for him and praying for sick people. I pray for those people every single day. I've got more than him still on my list.
Yeah.
And I pray to forgive them and treat them with caring, love, tolerance, patience.
Nice.
And myself.
Yes.
And but that's tied into doing the 9th step and doing the work. So
it is indeed very powerful. Thank you so much.
So I'm grateful, but I've learned from all of you. Thank you.
Exactly.
I have given up on myself in the same way that it sounds so terrible to say it out loud and it's embarrassing. So I know that I needed to say it, but in the same way that I kind of raised my hand in like week 2 of the workshop and said, you know, I just kind of feel like this won't work for me. And you said, okay, like you'll be the first one. And I was like, oh, that was rather rude, you know. But
Welcome to Herb.
all right, thank you. No, oh, you should have. Well, okay. But the thing, it's not about like the spiritual awakening. It's the health. And like, if I'm honest, I think I've said before, I don't get the 8 or 9 hours of sleep, but like, I don't take care of myself. I live on, spoiler alert, like energy drinks and like maybe animal or whatever's laying around because work is so important.
Right. Yeah.
But it's okay because I come to Herb 3 times a week, so I'm totally spiritual. But like, I think there's maybe like I might be missing something.
Oh, maybe.
Yeah, I don't know. And like a glass of water, I don't know, like the last time I had a glass of water was today, only because someone called me out on it, which I thought was rather rude. And you know, when's the last time, you know, all the things. And so I'm kind of calling myself out, because if you can at what, you know, 37, 40 something, if you can get sober and have an awakening and continue to grow, starting at that, then like, I'm not so special that I can't start right now today.
Oh my God, absolutely. At your young age, I was 43, but I didn't wake up till I was 48. So yeah, you've got a real advantage, and you just hang on, show up, talk to yourself, out yourself like you do every once in a while. It's great, it's fine. And maintain that sense of humor, but do the work and stay connected to an accountability partner of some kind, which I know you do. And and report in 5 years from now. I think it'll be interesting.
The ACA
Laundry
materials
list
that were posted and all that. So I did, for anyone who didn't see it, I posted the laundry list. I also posted the link. And then I put a link to the book, Adult Children of Alcoholics. It's the Janet, I'm not going to try to pronounce that name. I will. Wolitz. There you go. That's what I said, Wolitz. So, and I that wasn't on your list, Herb, but it seems pretty widely.
No,
yeah.
she's excellent. Yeah.
Okay. So that's all in there. And yeah, thank you. It seems like it was really helpful to a lot of people. So thanks for bringing that up.
So let's go back to the prayer for this. This is the promise of the 9th step captured in this prayer of St. Francis. It's that turning, steps 4 through 9, that ends up in the promises. This is a vision for you. All of the other side, the turnaround, listen to it as this vision for you, for each one of us. Lord, make me a channel of your peace, that where there is hatred, I may bring love, that where there is wrong, I may bring the spirit of forgiveness, that where there is discord, I may bring harmony, that where there is error, I may bring truth, that where there is doubt, I may bring faith, that where there is despair, I may bring hope, that where there are shadows, I may bring light, that where there is sadness, I may bring joy. Lord, grant that I may seek rather to comfort than to be comforted, to understand than to be understood, to love than to be loved. For it is by self-forgetting that one finds, it is by forgiving that one is forgiven, it is by dying that one awakens to eternal life. Amen. I've mentioned it before. This is the death of the false self, to speak in psychological terms today. The death of the false self. That's what this is. And that's the good news. We're shedding that skin so that the true self can emerge. a person that I was never acquainted with. Yeah. And that keeps manifesting as a result of this process 37 and a half years later. Right. Thank you.